Um, so I want to introduce Molly Martin. Molly is a retired electrician and San Francisco electrical inspector. She's a co-founder of Tradeswomen Inc. and other tradeswomen organizations. Molly founded and edited the quarterly magazine Tradeswomen from 1981 to 1999. She has written two books, Hard-Hatted Women, Stories of Struggle and Success in the Trades, and Wonder Woman Electric to the Rescue, which is free to read on Kindle. She also has a video about the history of women in trades, and I'm putting a link in the chat. Already have done that to the video and just listing the titles of the books that she has written. And so I understand that what Molly's going to do is tell a story, and people may have feedback for her, and I think she has about 3 different stories she's going to tell about her experiences. So now I will turn it over to Molly.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you to the collective that organizes these Zooms. We thank you for your service. It's been really wonderful to have this these presentations, especially during COVID. So I'm planning to just read from my book and read a story or 2 or 3, and then we can talk about it. I see there's quite a few tradeswomen and women I know from working in the tradeswomen movement for years. So I'm really glad to see you. But I want to start just by, I wrote a song about how I got into the trades, and it's kind of an introduction. So I'm just going to sing it, and then you'll know my story. When I was a girl, my mother said to me, when you're grown, what do you want to be? For choices, I had only 3, teacher, nurse, or secretary. I want to be in the brotherhood where I can build something and the pay is good. I'd have a trade and I'd have it made. Typing in shorthand had paid mom's rent, so I learned secretarial skills. I didn't really get what that meant till I had to pay my bills. They made me wear pumps and pantyhose to apply as a Kelly girl clerk. I still only made minimum wage, filing faster only got me more work. I want to join the brotherhood where I can build something and the pay is good. Then I'd have a trade and I'd have it made. I answered an ad for cocktail waitress, but they were hiring topless dancers. The man who was hiring looked at my chest and said, "You've got the answers." No experience necessary. You did not earn a thing. They said you could make $50 a night from tips stuffed in your G-string. I was too fat to be a stewardess, too angry to be a waitress, too allergic for hairdressing, too messy for house cleaning, hated kids too much to be a teacher, typed too slow to be a secretary, wasn't into helping people as a therapist or a nurse, not social enough for social work. What could I do? I applied for a job in the construction trades. They said, "Can you type?" I said, "Yes." I learned not to give that answer again because you just get stuck behind a desk. But I finally got into the brotherhood where I can build something and the pay is good. Now I have a trade and I've got it made. Now in the morning I hop out of bed, pull on my Carhartts and boots. I just stick that hard hat on my head, forget the business suits. No more pushing papers around and not creating a thing. Now I can proudly say I built that when I look at a building. I finally got into the brotherhood. But when I had to pay my dues, I wrote my check to the sisterhood, and my check was never refused. The International Sisterhood of Electrical Workers has a nice ring to it. Thank you. I love that everybody does this. You know, it's kind of gone out of fashion around here, but people are doing it. Okay. I'm gonna, Kathy, I was inspired when you talked about your next Zoom meeting, talking about things we used to do and that we can't do anymore, and what do we do instead? Okay, well, here's a short story I wrote about that. My friend Marg was building a coffin for her friend Bob. Marg was happy and excited that she could give back in this way, being a carpenter. But her project plans had to take into account her disability, a persistent back pain that had put an end to her career as a building inspector, and that now she spends her life managing. When we get together, Marg and I often collaborate on inventions and engineer projects that never get built. But now she was actually completing one of them. The funeral home had given Marg the dimensions of the concrete box that the coffin would have to fit into, with the admonition that another coffin builder had exceeded the dimensions, and at the burial, the coffin had not fit. At lunch with our retired carpenter friend, Pat Cull, Marg described her plan, a rectangular box rather than the typical hexagonal coffin shape. She used one 4x8 sheet of plywood ripped in half lengthwise for the sides and ends. Another ripped sheet made the bottom and top. She made the handles with rope. I had the lumberyard rip the ply for me to save my back, said Marg. I can still use a skill saw to cross-cut short lengths, but I don't do ripping anymore. She screwed a ledger around the inside of the box so the bottom could just be dropped in and sit on the ledger. I am an electrician, not a skilled carpenter, so I was proud of myself for knowing that a ledger is the ribbon of wood attached to the framing of a wall that the floor hangs on. I could totally visualize it. What size plywood are you using? Asked Pat. 1/2 inch, said Marg. Cross bracing? Asked Pat. Well, no, said Marg. I don't think it needs it. I use structural plywood. Anyway, the coffin is now at the funeral home. Pat and I looked at each other and each knew what the other was thinking. I imagined the bottom piece of plywood bending with the weight of Bob's body, the ply slipping off the ledger, and the bottom piece, along with the body, falling out the bottom of the coffin as it was lifted up. A moment of collective panic ensued. Marg frowned. She is a worrier. I'm sure it will be fine, said Pat. Marg's description of her liberal use of glue and screws eased my concern. Marg says there have been great strides made lately in screw technology. Hex head screws that go in easily and you don't have to pre-drill. Oh my goddess. Remember when we didn't have battery-operated drills, I said? I had to reach into my tool belt for a hammer and an awl to start the hole, and then screw in the screw with an old-fashioned slotted head screwdriver. In those days, we used 3/4-inch sheet metal screws to strap our electrical pipe to the wall. I had awesome forearms. People noticed my forearms. Yeah, I had an awesome back till I fell off that ladder, said Marg. And my knees were once awesome, said Pat, who was recovering slowly from a recent knee replacement. We were just generally awesome. The end. Now, Pat, who was in this story, is here today. And I think she might have had another knee replacement since then. We've had a lot of replacements. But anyway, we might want to talk a little bit about some of those things we used to be able to do that we can't do anymore.
Pat, do you want to add anything on? You can unmute yourself.
No, that's a great story. It happened just like Molly said. We're both like, whoa. uh, no, it was, but the kinds of things you can't do anymore. So many of those things I can't do anymore. Molly sent me a picture, I don't know, 6 months ago, of something she pulled out of her archive, and it was me, taking a nap, camping with my arms behind my head. All these muscles were like, ooh, I kept that picture. But no, it's hard to not be able to do all that stuff anymore because you can see
Pat,
what. Go ahead.
Your friends worked you long after you retired. We got you to do carpentry work for
Oh yeah.
us, even when you really couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, there's
And thank
another
you for
picture,
that.
Molly. Another picture Molly has of me sitting on the ground measuring something, some long pieces. It's like I was sitting, not even
Oh, here's
kneeling.
another picture I have of you too, Pat. Now this is a great picture that Anna Cooperberg took. You are hanging off a
Oh
roof,
yeah.
holding your skill saw, and I don't know, cutting something on the roof with your skill saw. It's like something a person should not be doing.
It wasn't my favorite thing.
Yeah, yeah, but you look so hot.
I'm going to interrupt just a second. Molly, did you want to take questions now or wait until the end?
Well,
Oh, well, I
actually,
thought we,
my hand has been up because Molly said she
I
was going to
know,
tell us a
Christine.
couple stories, and you only told us one. So tell us
Well,
more
okay, I'll
that's
tell
stories.
another story. I'll tell another story. And I'm having
Molly,
trouble with
can
this.
I ask something? There's a question in the comment. Did the coffin bottom hold?
Yes, it did. Of course it did. It did, especially after Marg told us about all the screws and everything she was using, but no, we were worried there for a minute. Okay, well, this is a favorite one I think you're gonna like. I'll tell you, it's called Sisters Restoring Justice. I think some of you may have heard it before. Every woman has a retribution fantasy, what she would do to her harasser or rapist. She probably won't tell you what it is, but she has one, maybe many. My group of tradeswomen activists not only imagined retribution, we planned and executed it. Perhaps corrective justice is a better choice of words. We were an organized group of women who were trying our damnedest to break barriers to non-traditional blue-collar work. Men wanted to keep those high-paid jobs for themselves. So when one of us finally landed a job, we were subject to harassment with the aim of getting us to quit. At that time, in the late 70s, sexual harassment was not yet illegal, and the term was not yet in popular use. We tradeswomen used the term gender harassment because the harassment we experienced wasn't usually about sex. We were working at integrating the construction trades, bus driving, firefighting, policing, printing, dock work, all the jobs women had been kept out of. One job classification we focused on was ferry boat deckhand. Women had won a discrimination lawsuit, a judge had signed a consent decree, and a handful of women had broken into that trade. As with construction, you had to jump both the barriers of bosses and the union. One of our biggest challenges was isolation on the job. Once you got hired, you were usually the only female there. We tried to combat isolation by recruiting more women and by organizing support groups wherever we were. Annie McCombs was our gal on the ferries, having made it through the union process. A militant lesbian feminist with a take no prisoners attitude, Annie was committed to increasing the numbers of women on the waterfront, to truly integrating the trade. After 5 years as a ferryboat deckhand, she had gained a reputation on the docks as someone who did not tolerate abuse. Fear of violence was based on reality. A common myth among fishers and sailors was that just letting a woman walk onto your boat was bad luck. We had met a woman fisher who had been thrown off a boat into the water by her coworkers who intended to run her off for supposedly bringing bad luck to their boat. Annie worked occasionally with another young woman, Patricia. She was Native American, a lesbian, and only 18 with little work experience. One day, Patricia approached Annie and told her about a guy on the job who was harassing her mercilessly. The harassment had turned violent when they worked together on the night shift. He had locked them in a bathroom they were assigned to clean and shoved her up against the wall. Only the security guard knocking on the door saved her from being raped. The guy assaulted her again the next night, but she fought back and was able to break free. Annie helped Patricia meet with her boss and the union rep, going through all the required motions. They got nowhere. The next step would be litigation, but we activists did not recommend women file individual lawsuits. You got blacklisted and unemployed. We resorted to direct action. Annie called a meeting and 30 women showed up. She told us about the situation and we began to strategize. How could we get this guy to back off and stop harassing our sister? We had heard about a group of women stripping a rapist naked and tying him to a pole in the middle of town. That was a great fantasy. But none of us was willing to take the chance of being arrested for assault. Whatever we did would have to be hands off. We also wanted our action to be collective, something we could all participate in. We needed to make sure this guy knew that what he was doing was wrong and that it had to stop. It would be great if the woman who he had targeted could confront him directly, if we could help her feel safe enough to do that. Jan, a tradeswoman's sister, spoke up. We need to confront this guy on our own terms in a place of our choosing, not at work, she said. One of us should get him on a date. This seemed crazy to me. I was never any good at picking up men, but other women in the group assured me it wasn't that hard. Hadn't we all been trained all our lives to do this? Jan volunteered to be the bait, and we worked out an elaborate plan for her to pick him up. She would lure him to a secluded location in Golden Gate Park where we would surround him and let Patricia confront him. I, for one, did not see how this was possible. How could we even get him to the park? Jan said she would invite him to a party at the DeYoung Museum and make some excuse to get him to the nearby Rose Garden. The Rose Garden is surrounded by tall hedges, perfect for hiding behind, and it's relatively dark. Our action would take place at dusk. Word of the action got around and our planning meetings expanded to 50. Everybody wanted to be involved with this action. What militant feminist wouldn't? We considered the possibility that the harasser might have a gun. Annie knew that some deckhands carried handguns in their sea bags. Many of us practiced karate and self-defense, and we engaged our martial arts experts to take command in case the perp responded violently. A woman was assigned to each limb and his head in case he reached for a gun or bolted. But unless he attacked, we were not to touch him. Women volunteered for specific tasks, lookouts, runners, watchers from park benches. We would not leave Jan alone with the man and risk him assaulting another woman. In the meantime, Annie drew up a map of the park with our location, and she and Jan planned out the timing. We were to hide in the bushes near the trail and pop out as Jan walked by with a harasser. I was dubious. Could we really pull this off? There were so many variables. What if he didn't go with Jan? What if he saw us in the bushes? What if the timing were hours off? 50 women had assembled some blocks away at a staging area in the Haight-Ashbury when a carload of country women from Mendocino County showed up. They had heard about the action through the lesbian grapevine. Now numbering more than 50, we all made our way to the Rose Garden. We hid behind hedges and trees, waiting silently for maybe 20 minutes. Everybody knew the plan. I couldn't believe it when I saw Jan and the guy walking down the trail. Jan really did it. Our Butch Dyke sister had transformed into a fetching het woman. She wore a pink sweater wrapped casually around her shoulders. Just as they crossed in front of us, the spotter blew a whistle. The designated women stepped out onto the trail, and then all the women materialized and circled the guy. Jan melted into the crowd. My only job was to stand in place with a mean look on my face. I can tell you this is not so easy when what one feels is exhilaration. Our chosen spokeswoman stepped forward menacingly. She addressed the harasser. Don't talk, just nod if you understand. A woman was assigned to remind him to nod. He did not need to be reminded. We know you have been harassing women on your job. We know where you live. We know the car you drive. If you continue to harass women, we will come and get you, she said. I could see his knees shaking. It looked to me like he had peed his pants. Patricia stepped forward, but she was not able to speak. Her partner spoke for her, naming the harassment. Finally, the crowd of angry women parted and let the man out. He was ordered to return to his car and to not look back. Our action had succeeded. We were jubilant. A cheer went up from the 50-plus women. Then we quickly decamped to an agreed-upon location for a post-mortem and to celebrate. As for the harasser, he was not seen around the waterfront for several months. Later, when he took a part-time job with the company, he made sure to keep his head down when passing Annie or Patricia. Soon after that, he disappeared altogether. The end. I wonder if any of you have been involved in any actions like this. There was a group in the Women Against Rape group in Santa Cruz, I think, was the one that tied the guy to the pole in the town, in the middle of town. Anybody want to comment? Or do you want me to read another story?
It sounds like in this day and age, if we surrounded a bunch of guys like that or one guy, it's something. I mean, it's so violent right now, so I don't know if that would work or not.
I'd like to hear another story. Yeah, I like your stories.
Okay.
I'm just going to say quickly, good job, you 50, 60 woman. Yeah, right on.
It was big. It was really a high. It was really a great action. It was a high. And we were planning to do more, but that was the only one we ever really accomplished. It's not as if there weren't a lot of men out there harassing women. Okay, this one's called Work Boots Step Out of the Closet. Come on, you can tell me, says Bobby. Are you gay? Bobby is a machinist who usually works in the machine shop, but today he is helping me change light fixtures in the warehouse at the corporation yard. I'm the only electrician, and sometimes I need a helper. There was no laborer available, and I am up on a 16-foot ladder. The song by the Police, Every Breath You Take, is playing on the boombox he carries around with him. This sounds like a song about stalking, I say. It's a threat. I never thought about it that way, he says, but I guess you're right. I've been at the San Francisco Water Department for a few months, and I'm getting along all right. Especially considering I'm the only tradeswoman there, except for Amy, the only female plumber. Amy is out digging up the streets every day, and so I rarely see her. Sometimes we convene a two-woman support group in the women's restroom, and it's good to know she's there. I think about how to answer Bobby. It kind of annoys me that he would just ask me like that. But on the other hand, I appreciate his directness. I like Bobby, and he's as close to a friend as I have among the men, but I know if I give him any information about my private life, it will be all over the yard within 24 hours. Do I want all the guys in all the shops to know? That's none of your business, I reply. Yeah, I'm a lesbian, and my lover is Dell, who works at Park and Rec. We were both female firsts. She, the first carpenter, and I, the first electrician to work for the city of San Francisco. Being the first is always a burden. You are aware that you set the stereotype for all the women who come after you. You feel the whole of womankind rest on your shoulders. You know you can't make mistakes, but of course you do, and then you imagine all of womankind suffers. Dell is 5'2" and slender, but you don't see her as small. Her wiry gray hair gives her a couple more inches of height. She's got broad shoulders and large hands, and she gets power from her low voice. She sings tenor with a gay chorus, the vocal minority. Dell and I don't live together, but I spend a lot of time at her apartment on Potrero Hill with its sweeping view of the bay and downtown. At my place in Bernal Heights, I have a roommate, Sandy, another electrician. She's messy and has a lot of stuff and a cokehead girlfriend I don't like. So I often stay with Dell. Truth is, I can't stay away. I'm mad for her. Since I got into the trades, my lovers have been tradeswomen. I can't resist a woman with a tool belt. First woman I fell in love with was a carpenter. They say you either fall in love with her or you want to be her. For me, it was both. I watch my lover build a house. She wears dirty blue jeans and scuffed work boots. Sweat stains mushroom on her t-shirt, which reads "Sisterhood is powerful" under a woman's symbol with a fist in its center. Sweat drips from her nose and rolls down the side of her face. Her sun-bleached curly hair sticks out from under her hard hat. Around her hips hangs a heavy leather carpenter's belt. It has a metal ring for the hammer and slots for the tape measure and various other tools and pouches for the nails of different sizes. A 2-inch wide leather belt holds it around her ample hips. It's helped by wide suspenders. She grabs a handful of nails and holds them with all the heads lined up in one direction, flips them down, and pounds them into the wood with great efficiency. Tanned arms bulge as she sinks nail after nail into the sill plate. She is focused and fast, the epitome of strength and ease. When she takes a break, she rolls a cigarette and lights it with a match put to her boot. She sucks in the smoke with obvious pleasure, and even though I'm super allergic to smoke and it will set me off coughing, that is the sexiest thing I've ever seen. How could a gal not fall in love with this image of power, strength, purpose? I was smitten, and I've been smitten by tradeswomen ever since. And they're the only ones who really understand what I go through at work. A person's got to have a partner she can whine to when she gets home. Lately, it's Dell who's been having trouble at work. Dick, her boss at the carpentry shop, doesn't like women or queers. He does everything he can to make her work life difficult. If it weren't for Dick, Dell would get along just fine. She loves the work, not the harassment. She once overheard him call her a dyke. That's a word we lesbians have reclaimed and embraced, but he meant it in the old-fashioned derogatory way. Negotiating homophobia and sexism at work is a balancing act for us. You just know that the boss will use any excuse to lay you off. Dell knows this too, that we women must always keep our cool in these situations. But sometimes she can't help herself. She just loses her temper, and then she doesn't know what she might do. One time she held off an attacker with a handsaw. If you swing it at waist level, they can't reach you. She swung the saw in a fit of rage, acting without thinking. In that case, rage saved her ass. But mostly when this happens, she leaves the confrontation feeling embarrassed that she could not control her emotions. She tells me I'm much better at not losing my cool, and she ascribes her rage to her hot Italian blood. I first met Dell at a tradeswoman confab when I was working with Wonder Woman Electric Collective in 1978, but we didn't get together as lovers until 1982 while we were organizing the first National Tradeswoman Conference that took place in Oakland the next year. We had both been working construction downtown before starting to work for the city of San Francisco. I lost my temper today, and now I might lose my job, Dell told me one evening when I got over to her place after work. By that time, she was remorseful. Why do I always lose my temper? How do you manage to stay so cool? I think the answer lays in the way we learned to respond to stress and abuse when we were growing up. She was a caretaker type, and I was oblivious. Dell says she always felt like she had antenna, that she was super aware of her surroundings. I, on the other hand, would put on virtual blinders and just continue pretending nothing was going on. This method of avoiding conflict has served me well in the trades. I pretend not to see, and often I really don't. Soon after we got together, I accompanied Dell to visit her family in Chicago. Right away, I felt at home. They are huggers and loud talkers, people who like to cook and eat big family meals and who live in their basements, never using the living room upstairs where couches are covered with plastic. Her mother is part of a big Italian clan, all sisters except for one brother who is treated like a king, but drowned out by loud women. Here's what happened, she said. I wanted to get my paycheck earlier in the day than Dick wanted to give it out. I had an appointment and I was leaving at noon. He was being totally obnoxious about it, and I got really mad at him. I said, fuck it, and walked out without the paycheck. Now he's trying to fire me for swearing at him. I wasn't swearing at him. It was a general fuck it. Anyway, just an excuse to fire me. I'm scared, she admitted. What are you going to do now? I asked, concerned. I don't have a plan except to wait to see what he does next. Maybe it won't go anywhere. A few days later, Dick upped the ante. He set up a kangaroo court with his supervisors and friends in the yard, who sat Dell down and questioned her. She had no representation or support. It was just a setup. That's when Dell went above the boss's head. We knew that the director of Park and Rec was an out gay man. Tom had gained a reputation as a respected department head who gave a shit about workers. He was also a player in the gay South of Market scene who, we heard, had tattoos all over his body. He always wore long sleeve shirts at work. Tom was absolutely great when I told him the story and showed him the daily journal I'd kept about the harassment, she said to me. Soon after that, Dick was fired. Our gay ally had saved Dell's job, but what would have happened had he not been there? Are you out on the job? She asked me later. Well, no, I admitted. It's none of their business. Dell is a proponent of coming out at work. She says it's better to give the guys the information so they will stop gossiping about you. For women, it might actually be a plus to be out. It's a signal that you're not interested in them romantically, and you never will be. A good way to stop come-ons. Telling them you're married with 5 kids works too, and I've done that. At the Tradeswomen Conference, she gave a workshop to help gay women come out. If we all come out, we won't be alone, she says. We'll be supporting our lesbian sisters. She quoted Harvey Milk. Every gay person must come out. As difficult as it is, you must tell your immediate family. You must tell your relatives. You must tell your friends, if indeed they are your friends. You must tell the people you work with. You must tell the people in the stores you shop in. Once they realize that we are indeed their children, that we are indeed everywhere, every myth, every lie, every innuendo will be destroyed once and for all. And once you do, you will feel so much better. Dell was pissed when I confessed I wasn't out on the job. What? She exclaimed. You're still in the closet at work? Don't you see why it's important for us all to be out? How can you leave me hanging out there on a limb? I almost lost my job. She had a good point, several good points. I thought about why I'd stayed closeted. It was easier. I didn't want to risk the wrath and disdain of my coworkers. They weren't really interested in my private life, and I couldn't care less about theirs. It was hard enough being just the only female on the job. You imagine the worst thing that could happen. They probably wouldn't physically attack me, but they could refuse to work with me, just like one white guy in the machine shop had refused to work with a black guy. They could refuse to talk to me, a trick men used on women all the time to get them to quit. They could fire me. I'd been hired on as a temporary worker with no employment rights. I wasn't safe, but I promised my lover I would come out. My electric shop was a windowless closet next to the machine shop where my boss, Manuel, and a secretary worked. They were always trying to get me to fill in when she was out sick, which happened with regularity. I had made the mistake of answering truthfully when they asked if I could type. I'd refused, and I hadn't relented even when Bud, the auto shop boss, cried crocodile tears as he tried to type with hands missing several of their fingers. Somehow, the guy was still able to work on trucks. But that was men's work. One day, Manuel made a reference to my husband. That was my opening. I hadn't had to wait long. I don't have a husband, I said. I'm a lesbian. When you come out to them, men are either totally shocked or they tell you they knew all along. Manuel was shocked, but he recovered quickly. I didn't have to tell anyone else. Word got around the yard. I heard one of the machinists, a religious nut, had moved me into the hated category, but he was someone I could avoid. Bobby was cool. I knew it, he said. The end.
Nice work. Nice work. Great ending too.
And you know, these are stories. It just happened that I wrote some of my tradeswomen stories down, but a lot of tradeswomen have the same stories or very similar stories. And when we had Tradeswomen magazine, that's kind of how we, that's how we interacted with each other in the 80s and 90s. And there weren't that many of us, but the magazine went all over the country. And women would tell me later that was one way they were able to stay on their jobs, to keep from quitting, that they knew other women were going through the same thing. And then we got the internet, and now I think women use Facebook mostly, I think, to interact. And it's really great for that because they can tell each other their stories and complain to each other. Anybody want to tell a coming out story? Anybody have a similar story?
Paula here. Trying to find the raised hand, but I'm struggling here, Elizabeth. Raise my hand. Oh God, it's so clear. Well, can you hear me? Yeah. Molly, I want to tell you that Tradeswomen magazine saved my ass for years. And I think I told you this when I saw you in Oakland at the OLOC. About every 6 months, I'm an retired electrician. I'm going to show you a picture. It made me think about it. I got up at 4 a.m. and made my roommate get up. It was my first day as an apprentice in 1980. And this was in Los Angeles. But about every 6 months, I'd think about quitting because I had just had it up to here with the crap. And it wasn't the work so much, but it was how I was being treated. And then and then we'd get a raise, and that would help. And then I'd get the Tradeswomen magazine, and it would save my ass. And I remember one article, it was the Monday Morning Blues. And it was so perfect because come Monday morning, it was like, am I going to put up with this shit anymore? And then I'd read that magazine, read a story, and it would just give me whatever I needed to get back.
Thank you, Paula. When people would tell me that was what kept me going, because when you're editing a magazine like that, and at the end I was all by myself. And in the beginning we had a collective, which got smaller and smaller. And, I felt really isolated doing that. So it was really important to get feedback from tradeswomen. Like people were really reading it, and it really did make a difference.
Absolutely. And I did a 15-year career with the IBEW in Los Angeles. My last 3 years, I was the first woman hired as an administrator for the training trust. And I helped the continuing ed and I finished my career in that position. And then I moved to Albuquerque and got to work at the community college. Oh, I got my master's degree while I was working at IBEW and the training trust. And I got a job in the trades department at our vocational school here and had a 15-year career, and first woman administrator hired there. And it was like 1996. And I said, what in the world? Why would it take them so long to hire a woman in that department at a college? It just blew my mind, but I had a blast.
You are a barrier breaker, and we thank you for that. I know the first ones of us who went out there had it the hardest. But it's still not easy for women in the trades. I know it's still not easy. People tell me that now. I'm long retired, of course. Well, here's a story about.
We have a hand up. Do you mind
Oh
seeing
no,
if
I
it's
missed that.
Sandy, do you mind?
Okay. I had 4 first woman blue collar jobs in the 70s, starting in 1972. And I'm actually wearing, you probably can't see it, my little tradeswoman pin, because I was a long distance member. And I also have this wonderful t-shirt that Max made. Do you remember that, with all the tools?
That was a really early one, Sandy. That was long.
Well, my little career was I'm going to try and do this quickly so I don't take up too much time. The first job I had was working on over-the-road tractors and trailers, which was a lot of heavy work. I hurt my back, but I recovered. And the second job I had was working on school buses for Baltimore County school systems. And they were being sued by primarily Black women who were called housekeepers, who were making less money than men who were called janitors for doing exactly the same work. So they decided that I should be their little poster child for how, progressive they were. So they sent a reporter to interview me, and they had a camera person, and they took my picture. I refused to talk to the reporter, and they did a full page story in the newspaper that they made up basically. And then they kept sending TV people and all this stuff. So it was an interesting experience. But during that time, this was around 73, I tried to get into the International Brotherhood, and they were not admitting women at all. And so then there was a lawsuit, and they had to admit women. And I tried again, and they said that I was over 25 and I was now too old to get in.
Oh, Sandy, that happened to me too.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I was 26 and I was too old.
I think I was 26, something like that. Anyway, then I got a job on the electrical crew in the high-rise housing projects in Baltimore City. And the job I ended up having the longest after that was 5.5 years for the state of Maryland, the first woman job again, all of these, as an offset printer, which is a disappeared trade now. But I wanted to tell this quick little teeny thing. When I was working for the city of Baltimore in the high-rise housing projects, I was the only white woman who had ever been in the projects. These were 10-story buildings. And when the police would come, or when the telephone repair people would come, they would come with armed bodyguards to take them around the buildings. And I worked there for over a year, and no one ever bothered me. I had a fun time. It was great with everyone who lived there. And then years later, these two young women who I'm convinced were lesbians came up to me on the street and said, "You worked at the projects," because I was doing the same thing with the tool belt and, the whole bit. But anyway, I want to tell us real quick about men and how they were. I was totally out from a young age, pretty young in the women's movement. So that was never an issue. I mean, men either put up with it and dealt with it, that I was a lesbian, or, whatever. But they always did their little things with women anyway, so it didn't really make any difference. But in the projects, there was this huge, huge power room. And one of the white guys from the shop came down and he said, "I want to show you this power room." I said, "Okay." So we were walking up to it and I could hear the buzz. Buzz, the buzz. Okay, I'm getting the buzz and I could feel this like energy and I could feel the heat. And then he opened the door, and I don't even think there was a light. I think he had a flashlight. Anyway, there was the whole wall of all the units, all the power, and it was just a huge wall. And it was hot as heck. And then I noticed that one wall was moving. And I thought, what the heck is that? We called them giant roaches. They're 3 inches long. They have wings. They can't fly, but they can soar. Hundreds. I mean, it was astonishing how many were in there. And I'm watching this guy and I had this bad feeling. I thought, so I made sure that I didn't let him get in behind me. And he was moving and I was moving. And his whole plan was he was going to lock me in that room with all those roaches.
Oh.
And no light. So that's my one little story about men and first woman jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't have that experience. I can't write that story. Okay, well, here I changed my mind. Here's a story for the contractors. I know there's some contractors here. It's called Deck Job. The day we were to do the estimate on Catherine Moore's house, my horoscope said I would meet a romantic partner. I do not believe in astrology. Still, I do read my horoscope daily. There in the chronicle is something to gauge one's life by, something to provide optimism or set conditions when there is no other frame of reference. Perhaps reading a fatalistic account of one's day might also create a mindset. Do we seek to accomplish what fate sets forth? In any case, I remain a skeptic. My lover and I were a bit late. Everyone says contractors are notoriously undependable, but if they only knew the problems we have, answering calls from clients at all hours, usually with emergencies that they can't wait, you just can't keep them all happy. And projects inevitably take longer than expected. That day, Sandy had been putting finishing touches on a stair job so we could collect the final payment, which would keep other checks from bouncing. Catherine Moore's house was a well-maintained Victorian, complete with gingerbread and a three-tone paint job. I imagined its owner to be an established professional. We were greeted by a large, gray-haired, 40-ish woman dressed in Katharine Hepburn slacks and a tailored shirt. She shook both our hands, and I could tell she worked at a white-collar job if she worked at all. But there was no hint of condescension in her warm greeting. You must be Sandy and Jill. Please come in. Sandy introduced herself as the carpenter and me as the Jill of all trades. I'm an electrician first, but I'm also proficient at simple plumbing, and I swing a mean hammer when I have to. You have the perfect combination of talents, said Catherine Moore. Her speech was charming, aristocratic, and there was something about her mouth that fascinated me. I waited for her to speak again. We were led to a spacious, tastefully decorated room. You see where this door is now, she addressed Sandy. I want double French doors to open it onto a deck with stairs leading into the garden. I watched, captivated, as she explained the addition. Her full lips fit so precisely over the large, perfect teeth, which with each clipped syllable. Her movements were so self-assured, so all-encompassing. I found myself wishing to be clasped in those arms, smothered by those lips. Could she cast this spell on everyone, I wondered? I tried to catch Sandy's eye, but she seemed intent and businesslike. By the time we got around to talking about electrical and plumbing, all my energy was concentrated on maintaining my composure. I was to install new track lighting in the kitchen, add an electrical outlet, and replace the kitchen faucet and the trap under the sink. The contract was drawn up and signed that day. If there'd been another estimate, no mention was made of it. Catherine Moore wanted to start as soon as possible. In the truck, I fished for Sandy's reaction. Isn't she an interesting woman? Sandy's sidelong glance told me she understood more than I'd intended. You have a crush on her, she teased. Well, yes, a little, I admitted, resolving silently to suppress it. I wouldn't do anything to damage our monogamous relationship. The understanding no other women had been very clear from the beginning 2 years before. I'd been the jealous one, and it was Sandy who, at my ultimatum, had given up her other lover. I knew my commitment would pass this test. The job progressed smoothly. I helped Sandy build the deck structure outside, and then while she finished the deck, I moved my electrical and plumbing tools into the kitchen. Catherine Moore, it turned out, was a self-employed accountant. She spent most of her day in her office, a room that had once been the Victorians' parlor, but she would read the morning paper over coffee in the kitchen and would chat with me while I worked. We developed a routine. She would make me a pot of tea. I'm not a coffee drinker. Then sit down and sort of read the news to me, adding her own running commentary. She read our horoscopes with such obvious pleasure that I began to suspect the attraction was mutual. These were particularly romantic times for both of us astrologically, and more than once I hid my reddening face, pretending to be engrossed in some construction problem. It's completely bogus, of course, I said. Perhaps, she said, and a playful smile crinkled the corners of her eyes, but perhaps we can't afford to overlook it. My infatuation refused to wear off. Instead, it intensified with new knowledge of Catherine Moore. She was at once flirtatious and nurturing, wise and funny, powerful and defenseless. Even when my work took me elsewhere, I was acutely aware of her presence in the house. Intuition told me the excitement I felt could not be one-sided. Still, she gave no clear sign of her feelings. The uncertainty was maddening. But I was also confident in my well-practiced ability to hide my own feelings from public view, and sometimes even from myself. No one would guess at my obsession with this woman, and soon the job would be finished and my temptation gone. One day, as I struggled with the trap under the sink, I felt her eyes on me. Self-employed Scorpios fare well today, she read. An older person plays a prominent role in your professional or personal life. Romance holds a delightful surprise. She watched me silently. Swearing at the pipes and wriggling into a new position did nothing to ease my discomfort. Finally, I gave up and slid out from under the sink. She sat at the kitchen table, a peculiar expression on her face, almost tearful in its intensity. I said nothing, only wondering what trick my imagination had chosen to play on me. Then she came over to me, knelt down, and put her hand on my cheek. "You have dirt on your face," she said. The sheer force of exploding sexual tension propelled us into each other's arms, and I was aware of nothing beyond her lips until, looking up, I saw Sandy standing above us, open-mouthed, hammer in hand. I am an actress in a lesbian soap opera, I thought, as she turned to go. "I'll just get my tools," she said. Surely this was only a line she had rehearsed. I didn't ask her to wait or come back. How would I have explained myself if she had? Neither our surprise at being discovered, nor my pain and guilt at hurting Sandy stilled the passion once it found its expression. That day, I moved into Catherine Moore's bed, leaving a message on the phone machine that I intended to indulge myself in this fantasy, and I hoped Sandy would still be there when I came home. We would have to work things out then, I thought, and resolved not to ponder the complications. We'd been lovers only a week, but I've confided to CM that in my 32 years, I've never experienced such an intense emotional connection with another person. When I put it into words, it sounds silly, I say to her. You know what I mean? Yes, she says, and the core of me knows we understand each other perfectly without words. I turn on my side and I look into her dark eyes, and she examines my soul, and I feel as if I know every part of her. Even shared, the vulnerability is terrifying. We kiss, and I am filled with wanting her, and we enter another world where nothing exists but the two of us. Our senses are so totally focused on each other. There is a droning noise in my ears, in my head, and I wonder if this is what they mean when they say you hear bells ringing. But I am pulled and distracted by its menacing tone, and still it takes me a while to realize it is a chainsaw I hear. Sandy's chainsaw, I think. And I look at CM, and we both sit up, staring stupidly as the deck falls gracefully away from the house and into the garden. The end. Someone told me that story had actually happened. I don't remember who it was, but it didn't happen to me.
Oh, okay. You you told it well.
Yes.
Very believably.
Nice combination.
Yeah, that was the, here, there's something I discovered after I quit writing for Tradeswomen magazine. I mean, I wrote for the magazine for a couple decades, the 80s and 90s. And, we were trying to explain our world, what was going on with us tradeswomen. But I realized after that I had been censoring myself about lesbian stuff. I mean, we did write about lesbians. We did. We talked about homophobia, and we did talk about these things, but we got a lot of pressure not to. We had gotten an original grant of only $5,000 from the federal government. And the federal government then thought they owned us and that they could tell us what we could write. It was, anyway. So some of these lesbian stories I wrote not for the magazine, but for, later. Some of them I wrote later for myself. I realized that I hadn't written the lesbian stories so much. Anyway, that was
We have sorry, Molly. Shivano has a question.
Oh, Shivano, yeah.
You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, this has been fun. I was wondering a little more about Wonder Woman Electric. I knew Sharon Aurora, and I knew some other, and I'm just wondering if you have any byline or story, particularly about that, because that van was amazing, how it would drive around San Francisco, It was very beautiful, Wonder Woman electric
Yeah.
van.
I don't know if you can really see this, but this is the cover of the book, and here's the picture. This is
Right.
Wonder Woman Electric. There's 6 of us in this picture. Suzanne DiVincenzo was the person who held the contract, and she learned electrical wiring in New York, with a Puerto Rican group that was like stealing electricity. That's how she learned wiring, because you couldn't get in the trades if you were female. That was an option. And she was also, she was somebody who she was a science person, so she understood the book learning part of it too. Yeah, I do have a couple stories about Wonder Woman Electric here. Let's see if I can find one of them.
One more question is they actually worked independently. So they had to market and they were working on their own. They had to do their own accounting and billing and that's not like being in a company or working for the city of San Francisco. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's right. Well, I'm still trying to, Machismo on Hay Street. Here's one. This is really a job we did. Machismo on Hayes Street. Who knows why people requested a contracting company named Wonder Woman Electric? Sometimes it was just to see women working as electricians. We were exotic. Sometimes it was because people preferred to hire women to work on their houses. We did exploit the stereotype that women were easier to work with, cleaner and neater. We made a special effort to keep our work sites clean. Sometimes we worked for general contractors who knew our work and hired us as a subcontractor. In that case, the building owner, who might never have hired women, would be shocked to see us on the job. And sometimes the client thought they could pay us less because everyone knows women are worth less than men. Sometimes they thought our labor should be free and they didn't have to pay us at all. Wonder Woman Electric found its clients through word of mouth mostly. I joined the collective in 1977 and immediately began to form stereotypes of clients. The working class folks who lived in the Mission and Excelsior districts of San Francisco, the ones who were scraping up the cash for the remodel or just to feed their kids, always paid their bills on time. You had the feeling that the bill got paid even if dinner was rice and beans for the next month. It was the rich clients who tried to skip out on paying. This amazed me. It didn't take long to realize that rich people as a class generally had no regard for the value or skills of tradespeople. They believed we were looking for any opportunity to rip them off. Lawyers were some of the worst. One lawyer ran a business advising rich people how to avoid paying their contractors altogether. How did they get that way? I tried to understand the psychology, but finally gave up. Why fight with these people to get paid? Maybe it was best just to avoid them. But we were listed as a licensed contractor in the San Francisco phone book. Remember that? So we got calls from all over the city. Much of our work was residential and in poor parts of town, but occasionally a commercial job or a job in a wealthy neighborhood would come our way. We were delighted when Wonder Woman signed a contract to do the electrical work remodel of what would be a new restaurant, the Hayes Street Grill. We knew that the owner of the new restaurant was a locally famous food critic, and we looked forward to working for a female business owner. The job included an electrical service upgrade for the building, which meant digging under the sidewalk to run a rigid pipe to the power company's street box and installing a 200 amp commercial main disconnect. Our founder, Suzanne DiVincenzo, took the lead on the job. She was smart with a college degree in physics. She'd been doing graduate work at Columbia when she joined other students to shut down the university during anti-war protests in 1970. She never finished her graduate degree. Instead, she and some other former physics students learned the electrical trade in the slums of New York, rerouting electricity with a Puerto Rican and Dominican squatters movement. At that time, if you were female, the above-ground avenue toward learning the electrical trade was closed to you. The building that would house the Hay Street Grill was a 3-story wood frame Victorian with a steep gabled roof, a residential building that we workers would convert into a restaurant with a commercial kitchen, essentially replacing electrical, plumbing, heating, and air movement systems, the guts. Upgrading the electric service would be the biggest job, but we would also be pulling new circuits for big kitchen equipment and a new lighting system. Much of our work would involve bending and installing electrical conduit in the unfinished basement, then drilling up through the floor to the kitchen. On jobs like this, there were often no plans. The contractor designs the electrical system and then builds it. You get the manufacturer's technical requirements for each piece of equipment, then calculate the size of the wire and conduit needed. We started with the service, the point where electricity comes into the building. Jean, Sylvia, and I crouched in a 3-foot-high corner of the dirt crawl space where the 2-inch service conduit would enter the basement from the street, as Suzanne gave us a code lesson on figuring the required size of a commercial electrical service. Part of this job would be disconnecting the existing service conductors and temporarily reconnecting the new wires live, a dangerous prospect. But we were glad not to have to do it while standing on a 30-foot ladder, the usual procedure when service wires are overhead. Electricians are more likely to die from falling off a ladder than from electrocution. Normally, there's no reason for the electrician to climb on top of the roof, and I can't remember why I had to get up there. But at one point, I found myself straddling the peak. I was creeping along as carefully as I could, watching the sheet metal workers installing the big air intake and exhaust structures that ran from the kitchen to the roof on the outside of the building. Those guys had safety harnesses, but I didn't. Wonder Woman Electric had no harnesses nor any safety equipment. I used my own respirator to protect my lungs while working in attics and crawl spaces. Instead, we should have taken job safety more seriously. In the 3 years I had worked with the collective, we had 2 serious fall accidents that could have been prevented if we'd had a safety program. On the roof, I tied a piece of wire around my waist and secured it around the brick chimney, thinking it might break my fall. Just then, the side cutter pliers I was carrying slipped out of my tool pouch and bounced with dramatic effect off all the surfaces on the way down to the bottom of the light well 40 feet below. It was suddenly easy to imagine losing my grip and tumbling to the ground. But it was a good thing I didn't fall. That wire could have cut me in half. It was just one of the stupid things I did as an electrician that could have killed me, but didn't. I think it was here that I began to understand the concept of machismo, the female version of machismo. Female construction workers all know that men in the trades think taking risks on the job is somehow connected to their manhood. Risky behavior is what separates the boys from the girls in the minds of the macho guys. The construction company's owners probably loved the macho attitude, as they wouldn't have to provide personal protective equipment to their workers who thought concern for safety made you a pussy. In some ways, the female version was worse. It was self-inflicted. We felt we had to be better than the men in every way and not be afraid to take risks on the job. The 5-woman crew of Wonder Woman Electric enforced the macho credo by bucking each other up and sometimes taunting each other when faced with a frightening task. We also helped each other in risky situations more than the men did. But I was working alone on the roof. My matcha attitude melted away as I imagined myself following that hand tool down to the ground. I managed to complete my task and climb down without mishap, but I was shaken. It was our policy to write into our contracts a payment schedule based on work as it was finished. We set the main service and waited for a scheduled payment stipulated in the contract. No money came through. Why, out of all the subcontractors on the job, were we not getting paid? We never met the owner, but she had no problem with our work as far as we knew. She did have partners in the enterprise, and perhaps it was one of them who deigned not to pay us. Suzanne was the foreman charged with dealing with the owners, and she had to go through a general contractor. So when the first payment did not materialize after several weeks, Suzanne pulled us off the job. We had not finished the electrical service, a technical part of the job that requires a contractor's license and knowledgeable crew. The power company, Pacific Gas and Electric, would not connect the service to their grid unless it had a green tag, signifying it had been permitted, inspected, and signed off by the city. Sometime later, that payment came through. We figured because they learned they had to pay us in order to get the inspection and green tag. In the basement, we discovered that the owners had hired an unskilled electrician to finish the interior job, apparently because they thought our bid too costly. He was likely unlicensed and had done the work without a city permit. No inspector would have let this sloppy work pass. The wiring was in conduit, a requirement for commercial work, but this guy had never learned how to bend pipe. The bends were kinked and poorly made. We were outraged. We worried that his work would reflect on us, as one permit had been issued to us. We also worried that his poor work could cause a safety hazard in the restaurant. The purpose of the electrical code is to address safety. We should have reported this unsafe work to the district electrical inspector. Maybe we did. I don't remember. But we certainly didn't want to give him or anyone else the impression that we had done the work. As a way to register our discontent, I wrote on all the conduit, Wonder Woman Electric, not responsible for this work. When the general contractor saw my handiwork, he was not happy, but he probably figured no one would ever go down into that unfinished basement. We got our final check for the service installation and vowed never to work for these people again. The restaurant opened in 1979 and today remains a destination for affluent opera goers. The kinked pipes might still be there. I wonder if our remonstrations were ever painted over. And I wonder about the integrity of the interior wiring in the walls. Did that unskilled electrician who didn't know how to bend pipe know how to do anything else? Did he have a license? Did he pull a permit? Was his work inspected? Did he get paid? The end. The other one I wrote about Wonder Woman Electric is Wonder Woman Electric to the Rescue. It's about working in a bar that was owned by Charlotte Coleman, who was the first lesbian to open a lesbian bar in San Francisco, and she owned a bunch of bars in the city. And we worked on all of them, I think. Wonder Woman Electric worked on all of them. It was just me and they were transvestites then. They were these men who just showed up in women's clothing. It was a transvestite bar.